Hi, everybody. Welcome to the No Code, No Problem. How you too can build custom tech solutions. My name is Jonathan Watson. I'm the CTO at Clio. Brent and I are going to be running kind of co-presenting. You're going to run most of the content. We're going to bounce some questions back and forth and take some questions from you folks as well. But first, I'd like to introduce Brent. As the co-founder and CMO of US Legal Marketing Group, Brent provides expertise in full stack digital marketing for law firms. Part marketing technologist, part content creator. He builds thoughtful user journeys that bring value to consumers through compelling messages and experiences. Over to you.
Thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate that. So, quick background on myself. The first decade of my marketing career was spent in the travel industry, but then 7 years ago, I was recruited by an attorney to join his practice, which at the time had just 2 offices, and now we're up to 7 offices in 4 states, over 100 employees, and we've implemented a lot of really empowering technologies that have helped us to scale. Clio being a big one. We've been using Clio Manage for the last 5 years. So excited to share some thoughts with you guys. When I talk about the state of technology as it sits right now, which is an ever evolving state, how you can use some strategic planning to set yourself up for the future amid changing landscapes. Then we're going to talk about how that can be implemented into marketing, operations, and legal services. And like Jonathan said, wrap up with some Q&A. So would love for you guys to be thinking about how this could be implemented into your practice and ask us questions. So I want to kick off with the state of technology today. This morning was a really eye-opening experience, I think, for a lot of us with how far we've come. I mean, it was, 2 years ago that Clio Duo was initially announced, I believe, and last year was the rollout, and to hear about all the incredible tech that's coming to users in the very near future is just super impressive. So Clio's been on the forefront of that. I think what I see from a user perspective is it's really empowering the end user to be more efficient with their role. So you're even going to see some slides that I created are somewhat non-relevant almost, thanks to the awesome stuff that Jonathan's been working on. So, I mean, I'd just be curious to hear from you, Jonathan, with where we are today compared to just even a year ago at ClioCon. What do you think's been some of the biggest advancements in your realm?
Yeah, and I would probably start with just like the state of technology and AI in a couple of ways. The world for the longest period of time was kind of built for the builders. Like if you could put your hands on keyboard and write code, the world could be unlocked in some interesting ways. And the coolest thing about AI and the tools that are coming to market now or have come to market is it allows the people with the ideas to now bring those ideas to life, and effectively says the idea people are the people that are going to drive the next wave of innovation versus just the builders. And I think that that's awesome in so many ways. The rate of change is going to accelerate. We're going to see people try more things and then fail and just build on top of that as we go.
Yeah, it really kind of democratizes the ability to grow your tech platforms. And that's where right here on the next slide, you'll see there's a whole new skill set vertical being created. Like you said, the people that can ideate now can go and implement without the use of, a UX designer, a developer, having a team around them. They can be empowered through these platforms and tools that are now available to them. And there's literally new platforms, tools, features, functions coming out, every single day. So it's really, the world is your oyster. I think what's really important for end users is that you're a constant learner at this point. That's the biggest thing that I've seen. I can only do HTML. I'm a non-technical person, but through these tools, it enables me to create these custom solutions for our real world examples, which is what we're going to be getting into. So anything else that you would want to talk about, just where you see us going, Jonathan?
I mean, it's kind of a few things that I'd probably add on to that, just to open up the realm of possibility a little bit. I was delayed, probably like many of you, coming into Boston over this period of time. And I took that opportunity to work on an app for my daughter to like practice her spelling. And I'm a coder. This is something I can do as part of my skill set. But instead of doing any of that, I just worked with AI and built an entire app start to finish in the 3 hours I sat in the airport. I was effectively ready to launch it. And I did not write any UX or any code. I had a whole bunch of things that helped me get there, but that's just still the early stages of the tools. These things are advancing, and I'm a big sci-fi nerd. I grew up on Star Trek, and that whole thing of you just tell the computer what you want it to do and like it just manifests it on the other end of it feels very close to where we're going in our firms, with our technology and our daily lives, like how you're managing your work and your life. All of that is just it's an exciting time to be in technology.
Absolutely. So I think as we see what the future can hold, you need to be able to plan and prepare for it, and you need to be dynamic in that sense. And so both of my grandpas were in the armed forces, and there was a saying that the Navy came up with in the 1960s of KISS, keep it simple, stupid. And I think that's highly relevant and applicable when you are looking at how you build out tech solutions. The more complex it is, the more prone it's going to be to break, the harder it's going to be to manage, to have internal staff adopt it. So I kind of repurposed this into how you should be looking at the opportunities within your practice. And it's keep, improve, start, and stop. So you want to be able to keep what's working well. Just because you can change something doesn't mean you inherently should. I feel that a lot of times, people say if it's not broke, don't fix it. And I agree with that to a certain extent, because a lot of times when you're implementing something new, you're sacrificing what's already a proven, commodity or success. So keep what is working well. What you want to do is then improve on the things that can be made easier. You want to start new ideas or actions, get those rolling. So you need to be a self-starter with this and figure out where there's the opportunities. And then you need to stop the inefficient and ineffective activities. And I mean, so much of what was presented this morning and what Jonathan and the team have been working on is really taking these things that are historically manually done and enabling AI to support, the team so that they can have their bandwidth freed up, and stop the inefficient things on that. I mean, when you guys, Jonathan, are, ideating what your processes look like, does this have any relevancy to you?
For sure it does. And for us, it comes down to just how do we remove toil? And there's so much toil in the daily life. And you can look at like, how do I make this process more efficient? But you may only be spending 10 minutes on that thing every day. And it's not actually worth the squeeze at this point in time. But you may have a lot of toil in your day. Like I spend all this time finding this information or collating it or drafting these things or producing these emails. And that's where AI can really come in and just remove that whole set of work. And we deploy this at scale. So I know we talk about this primarily for law firms, but we have more than 400 engineers inside of Clio's R&D organization, with a lot more joining from the VLEX team, pending regulatory approval. I'm required to say that. And it's like we practice this. How do we remove toil from developers' jobs? Because we need them solving these problems in building. And the more we can get them focused on that, the faster they can deliver solutions. Has been a big part of the rate of change you've seen out of Clio in the last 6 to 12 months.
Yeah. So there is actually a whole segment on this topic being spoken about, maybe right now, actually. And it's the building backwards methodology that was kind of made famous by Jeff Bezos, called the Amazon method. And what you want to do is you are working backwards from the end result to determine your path to get there, okay? So there is basically a way that I feel people are picking the wrong problems to focus on from the very start, right? So instead, what you can be doing is you can be saying, okay, here is the most high potential impact I can make on the business with a proposed solution, and then figure out What does it take to get there? What are the tools needed to achieve that? Does that fit into my tech stack? Does that fit into my budget? There's a lot of considerations that can be used. But by kind of parsing it out step by step from the end goal, it makes it a lot more action oriented, which is, as I said on a previous slide, you need to be a self-starter. And I feel that this is a great way to do it. So these are some of the things that I've been looking at and the strategies I've been thinking about internally for our own law firms and the clients I work with on how do we get them to be in a 2025, 2026 state and keep them continuously progressing. So it's been helpful for us. Everyone works differently, but before I get into some applicable, specifically like marketing solutions to start, which I think I'll run point on for that. Is there anything else you'd want to just add?
I think my first question is maybe your slides describe it a little bit. Do you have an example of one of these where you've kind of picked the end result and then worked your way backwards?
Yeah. So we have an example in the operations area, and the end result was decrease our accounts receivables. That's the end goal. So how do we do that then? How do we use the tools? How do we use the internal knowledge? So I'll touch on that. So, think about what these impactful solutions are that can actually help your bottom line and revenue, that lead to your success, that leads to greater profitability, and just sets your firm firmly planted so that it can thrive in the future. So getting into marketing, I've got a few different examples that I care to start with. There are endless opportunities within marketing. I know that Clio Grow was showcasing some new features today with their platform. I think marketing's been arguably one of the more disrupted spaces, as well as just the legal industry as a whole, thanks to AI. But I think that just creates opportunity, if anything. And so you shouldn't look at it as something to be scared of. I certainly don't. While it's definitely leveled the playing field for a lot of individuals that had unique skill sets, such as myself. I was really good at taking data analysis, figuring out then what kind of content should be made, how is that distributed, how is that targeted. AI can do a lot of that now. I'm okay with that. I'm figuring out ways that can just make me actually better at my job or provide a better output. So here's a few examples that I think can provide better outputs specifically. So the first one's Google Ads. Just show of hands, how many people are using Google Ads to advertise right now? All right, maybe about 30% of the group or so. For our practice, we spend $1 million per year on Google Ads. Let that sink in for a minute. What that means is that I need to make sure that we are reaching a point of scale that I can continue to keep our return on ad spend as high as possible. Because what you generally see, you reach a saturation point within Google advertising. You've either maxed out your kind of demographic targeting, your geographic targeting, or your keyword targeting. So then it starts to almost become, okay, we're going to expand geographically, or we're going to open it up to a lower household income demographic that might not be as valuable as a potential client to your practice, but you're willing to take it because money in the door is always good. But what you can now do is that you can send better information to Google directly from your CRM. So this is a very simple zap that's in the screenshot that you see here. But Google Ads has been working on this for a long time. I started with their beta testing in 2020, and they just brought in native integration essentially within the last 8 months or so, I believe it was. Before that, it was very manual. You're having to push data into a spreadsheet and then upload that on an ongoing basis. So that's just another example how, as recently as 5 years ago, there had to be a manual action of uploading data to Google Ads. Now, AI is automating that. So that's really powerful. And so what this does is, from a marketing perspective, it's really easy to attribute, okay, this lead or this phone call. But there's an offline conversion that happens in most firms, and that's usually the consultation point. Sometimes that is booked online. Our firms actually do paid consultations, so we have to do that over the phone to collect payment. We're working through some new solutions, but For now, that's done over the phone. In addition, when someone comes in for a consultation and you're meeting with a potential client, you send out that fee agreement, that gets signed. That's probably happening within your CRM. But how is that getting passed back to Google? Historically, it hasn't been. So this is a great way that you can now be sharing data with Google Ads directly. That's going to improve your targeting. So this is a simple automation. It's a two-step automation. And then from that, Google is using, their internal learnings to better target prospects like your consults, like your clients, and that's going to keep your return on investment up. So really powerful, very simple automation that if you're doing Google Ads, I highly encourage setting up as soon as possible. The next piece is around SEO. And I mean, SEO has changed tremendously. It's only becoming more and more difficult. I'm assuming anyone that has been doing SEO for their law firms is probably seeing a decline in their performance thanks to the AI overviews that now show up in the very first position. In addition to that, people are treating these LLMs like OpenAI, Gemini, whatever they choose to use as like a search engine, because they feel that they're going to get a personalized recommendation by putting in, I live in Denver, Colorado. I have a family of 2. I've been married for X number of years. I'm really worried about X, Y, and Z things. Who would you recommend to represent me in my divorce? That feels a lot better to prospects than just putting in Denver divorce attorney into Google and getting a search result that is really just a law firm that's, understands how the game works and optimizing to rank, right? Or be willing to pay to have that Google ad show up at the top position. So one of the things that's really interesting is taking that human component into consideration. And what we've been doing is we have actually been scraping Reddit, because that is, really organic human content, people asking questions, sharing experiences with others. And we're able to create this agent. This was done by my SEO specialist, who's awesome. And what it does is it go out and scrapes Reddit for content or threads that's relevant to us. It parses that through, sends it through the AI agent, funnels that down so that then we can get some more information out of it. And then we get an output that tells us, okay, here are recommendations for new content. And Google is really moving towards this like native language search. I remember 10 years ago, we were talking about voice search, right? When everyone got an Alexa, like nothing's really changed. It's just how it's being done. And so I think that this is a really cool automation, but as I was sharing with Jonathan earlier, we're going to get to some slides that I created this deck a couple weeks ago, and this is showing N8N. Well, now OpenAI have released their own agent, right? So like even N8N, I bet they're going to, see quite a few users go out the door. So that's one of the things where you have to still keep thinking back to kind of your strategic implementation of AI and technology platforms so that you can scale and that you can also pivot with the changes, because I feel pretty confident saying, I think you would agree, Jonathan, like change is inevitable in this space.
Yeah, it's inevitable. And vendor lock-in is something to be a little bit nervous about when it comes to like your broad applicable. They're gonna fight for 1 to 6. Jack showed that slide where they're all converging. And I've chatted with people at Google and others where like, we're just all going to start shuffling the top of the deck, like constantly as we make new innovations and the next set comes around. So look for the frameworks, the tools, Gumloop, N8N, like there's others out there that can really kind of hide away some of that technology choice in various ways, but, or use Clio.
There you go. Love it. All right. So another one that's kind of SEO related, and this is where, as I said before, I'm not a developer, but this has enabled me to do some really cool stuff. So take a note of this. I highly encourage you guys to test it out. You need to have a creative idea that drives this. And what I mean by that is think about something from a message that you want to share in a visual way that you think people would be able to consume or process better by seeing it visually. Go to Gemini, use the Canvas tool within Gemini, and you can create an infographic that gives you the source code that you can just directly upload into an HTML editor. And is it perfect? No, you can then go back and change some styling. But once again, you don't need to know the CSS. You don't have to know all of this like coding to create something that's really cool. And when I think about it in the past, early on in my career, I remember working with designers to make, static image infographics, and, it cost money. It took time. There were usually rounds of revisions. They weren't responsive to devices, most importantly. And then also from like an SEO perspective, Google's not able to crawl that image and distinguish the text that's on it. So you really lose a lot of kind of juice because of that. But they do see that you have a piece of kind of rich media on your page that benefits you. But what you can do now is you can get this, custom infographic that's code-based, where you can have the text crawled by Google, simply upload it. But this is where, you need to be thinking creatively, as I mentioned on the onset, because if you just use generic prompts, you're going to get generic content. So like, I highly recommend, redacting information so it is confidential, but you can have like trends about your clients, what you're seeing in your marketplace. This one that's showcased here is kind of just about like divorce trends over the decades, was something that I thought was an interesting topic. There's obviously, particularly work in family law, and the gray divorce. It's been a huge trend, right? So many people that got married early in life, built a life together, coming to the kind of final stages, are saying, I want to go out and do my own thing. And they've called it the gray tsunami even. And so I thought that was interesting. And this was an example. And I mean, there's a lot of other platforms that can be used. But once again, like I was sharing, this took what required, 3-4 people in the past to just now one who doesn't even have to truly be tech savvy. So I think that's a really cool piece where, we're just talking about how technology is really being enabling creative thinkers at the end of the day. So the next one that I want to talk about from a marketing perspective is landing page designs. If you do any type of paid media traffic and you're not sending them to a dedicated landing page, that's just wrong. That's been, a best in class practice for, over a decade. So you want to be able to match the messaging from your ad to the landing page to provide, a cohesive experience. You want to be speaking to the problems and the solutions that you're providing to that prospect that it's relevant to. But creating landing pages can be really time consuming. There's a lot of great kind of like WYSIWYG builder platforms. We've used Unbounce for years, but one of the things with Unbounce is we love A/B testing. I love A/B testing. I nerd out on that type of stuff. But I will spend literally weeks thinking through the user interface, thinking about moving things. Okay, where's the call to actions? Where's, the forms, the messaging, the imagery, the headlines, all these things to come up with something that I think is incredible, only to find out my champion variant that I've been running for 7 years, to me doesn't look like anything special. It's still the top converter, right? And so I just wasted a ton of my personal time on building something that ultimately didn't deliver results for our business. And now you can take that time back by using a lot of different platforms that you can kind of pull templates from. They can give you an idea. You can then upload that, put in your own messaging, design it, get your brand colors in it, and then upload to the tool of your choosing. So that's another piece that I've found, within my personal career, I've spent a lot of time and effort into, which I'm just regaining back, which I then encourage you to be investing in kind of your strategic efforts that can really drive the tangible results. Last piece on the marketing side of things is local search. So people love local search because they like to say that's how I get free phone calls, right? Well, one, I hate to break that myth, but nothing's free in life. The only way that you're going to show up in local search is by investing your time and effort. And usually you need to have a lot of citations built out. And if you don't know what citations are, those are listings on other websites of your business. A lot of them come at a cost as well. So local search takes effort. Something though that you can do that's fully within your control, it's once again just an investment of time, is making sure that you're getting reviews. And I'm going to show you a way that you can even automate that at the end of this. But once you get those reviews, Google wants to be able to see that you're active on your profile. So I created this automation where anytime there is a new review that is posted to one of our Google business profiles, it filters it out to only have 4 and 5-star reviews proceed, because anything that's a 3-star or lower, you should be, speaking with the attorney that's referring to, or talking to your operations team, finding out why this individual didn't have, a satisfactory experience, so that you can post or honestly just reach out to them personally. As much as we're talking about like AI and automation, specifically in this, but just in the conference as a whole, the human touch still goes a long way. So let's not lose sight of that. And a lot of times people just want to be heard. But for those positive reviews, like I said, Google wants to see you responding to them. So what you see right here is a prompt gets sent into ChatGPT with the specific comment or message that was left within the review. And then it automatically creates the post and goes directly onto your Google business profile. And as I said before about the human touch, I think that's also important when you're doing it from an automation perspective and making it actually still feel human. So when we're responding as the law firm, which actually it's just like AI responding, we still want the user to think like, oh, I was read, I was heard. So the delay I have, instead of just being posted, 1 minute after the review is left, which everyone would then be a telltale sign like, oh, this is an automated review and it's not from a real person. I have it set to be like 2 hours and 17 minutes, something kind of obscure that can make it seem more realistic. So that's one that has been really beneficial. I do have a video on YouTube. If you want the step-by-step instructions on it, check it out. A lot of people have gotten a lot of value out of that. So now that we're going to move on to the operations side of things, once again, keeping the end in sight. I'm going to touch on that. I alluded to the accounts receivables automation, and looking forward to sharing that. First, though, is call answering. That's a huge topic of AI right now. Intake is super important to every single firm, regardless of your practice area. But you need to be able to kind of vet people out and see if they're the fit, ask questions, make sure they meet residency requirements, make sure you can run a conflict check. There's a lot of things. But there is a way that you can absolutely implement like an AI answering service. And there's tools, this screenshots from CallRail that has built out automated sequences. So once again, you don't even need to be highly efficient or proficient, I should say, at building out these automations. You've got these templates built into the platform for you. And this allows you to be 24/7. I think being where the clients are, when the clients are there is really important. And that can be extremely helpful in getting more leads and clients in the door. But you do want it to still have that human touch, or the alternative, be very transparent. Let people know when it's AI. I mean, what's your feeling on that, John?
I was going to ask you this question. So often everybody thinks about automating their jobs, but they forget that it puts all this load on the other person. And I have a perfect example of this. We needed to call a junk, removal company. And we've done this a lot. We just moved. My wife would usually hop on the phone 30 seconds later. It's scheduled and you move on. She got an AI on the other end of it. They were testing it out. And it took her 12 minutes to book that appointment because it's asking question after question after question. She's like, I just need somebody to show up at my house sometime in the next 4 days. And I think it's a really important part around, the be human, but also realize that you might be putting too much load in that first touch point. Have you seen a version of this, or what do you coach around it?
Yeah. So here's an example of one of these super long AI sequences. But the thing before I kind of delve into that, to your example, I mean, every single person in this room, I'm sure, has sat on with a airline, a credit card, or bank company where you get to the point and you're just yelling,
You're angry, you're raging.
yeah,
I mean, you can get to somebody.
smashing zero or yelling, support, whatever it is. And so you do want to be really cognizant in these solutions that you're rolling out because they can have a negative detriment or impact to your business. And so I do think it's gotten way better. So like this is a screenshot from a client that I work with who's rolling it out. And it's as you can see, highly sophisticated. It's also highly costly. I think that's one thing I would warn the law firms. You guys have a bullseye right on your back for a lot of these agent builders right now because they know that you invest into your business. You're generally, you're obviously highly educated, but you're also very tech adapt for the most part within a service-based industry. And so that makes you guys ripe for, I'll just say, bad players in the space to say, oh, I'll come and automate your entire business end to end. And then because it isn't done effectively, you're going to end up losing business. And so I do think that, you really need to be cognizant of what that workflow looks like.
I think one of the best implementations of AI is actually after hours answering the phone. Instead of hitting a voicemail, the best flow in the world, in my opinion, is, hey, you've hit us after hours. Give us some details and we'll get right back to you as soon as we're open. Like that's so powerful at that point. Whereas before you would just talk into this thing and not get any details that you could utilize in a lead or a prospect. And now you can carry it into something useful in the morning.
Well, and not only that, you think about how that can then actually be integrated into your CRM. So as opposed to, the example you shared, let's say you don't have an after hours answering agent, goes to voicemail, your receptionist or intake team listens to it, has to log that information manually into your CRM, pick up the phone, call them back. Now they're coming in and that person's, in the lead stage or whatever you have that titled within your pipeline. And so they're able to do their job more effectively. You're also able to set expectations better with that prospect, as opposed to voicemail. I mean, it's still amazing to me that there's, such a gap in what I would maybe call like the customer service side of law firms. The lack of communication, the lack of urgency of getting back to people. So I do agree, like after hours, I think is the best use of it as it sits today. I do think that it'll continue to evolve and get better where
it's a great place to test it.
Yeah.
Right. Like you're not picking up the phone during that point anyways. You're not going to be pushing people out of the business in that way. And your recovery mechanism is just pick up the phone on the other end. And you're very transparent up front that it's after hours, but I'll get back to you.
Absolutely. So the last piece in operations, and there's a ton of like operational efficiencies that can be gained through automations and AI. I just picked out some that I feel are where there's kind of the biggest revenue leaks. And so that's in your intake, and then that's your accounts receivables. So for us, our goal is to have a 93% realization rate in our law firms. That's what we call the gold standard. Anything less than that, we start to notice, or we say, okay, what's going on? Is there one outstanding case that has really high AR that's driving that up? Or is it a lot of little cases? And so partnering with my operations team, we're able to run an AR aging report out of Clio. So then we are getting notified. It's sending us that information. We're able to get some additional context out of it. So then that we can sort and say, okay, it's X attorney or Y attorney. That's kind of our worst offender. They're doing work on cases when there's already outstanding balances, when we should really be saying, hey, you either have to replenish your trust or we unfortunately have to withdraw at the end of the day. This is still a business and you guys need to treat yourselves as business owners. I mean, you don't go to the doctor, or that's actually a bad example, my Canadian friend up here, but you don't walk in and just expect to get free service. And attorneys, even though you can be a bleeding heart, especially, like I shared, we're in family law, which is so highly sensitive, and you want the best for people. Like, your time is valuable and you need to be collecting on that. And so we're then able to kind of process this and let our teams get information with the specifics that allow us to be much better at collecting that AR. And so before I kind of move into the legal services sides of things, I think operationally, there's a lot more you can be doing. These were just some of the things that I think can generate a lot more revenue. As we, kind of shared earlier, there's also opportunities for you to just be gaining time back, to be leveraging, and it also allows you to maybe think about your staffing as well. So moving right into legal solutions. Now, we're not lawyers up here. We just worked with them, right? So I would also say, I created this prior to the amazing announcements that came out. So I'm glad that Jonathan's sitting up here. He's going to be able to share a little bit of information in the examples that I curated that are going to be modified, let's say, with the new tech available. But you should be looking at what are the efficiency tools that you can be using as an attorney to kind of streamline your workflow. You heard about most of them today. And if you're not implementing them, now or in the very near future, you are going to get left behind. I mean, like, what would you say if you had to kind of share the adoption rate of attorneys? I mean, we saw it was 79% in the legal industry. I believe
Quite interested in AI and looking to adopt it.
or just 72%, I think it was in general.
And others, what we see is like widespread interest and just saying, hey, I need to figure this out because, time is money. I also have often like more demand than I can service. And like, what's the way that I can juggle more inside of my firm and do that more effectively? So that's a big part about this shift into the context-aware platform and Clio work. And, Brent didn't bring me up here to just talk about all Clio products, but I kind of have to as part of my job. But if you get a chance, go down to the product lab and go get a demo of Clio work. It's our first version. So like, keep that in mind, and it's a good first version. And I think that you'll find that it will develop rapidly over this time, but it's built for this.
Yeah.
How do we remove the toil? How do we bring together all your information? How do we increase collaboration? And how do we help you achieve better outputs on the other end of that so you can do your best work? And it's just really, how do we turbocharge all of you and your firms by providing these sorts of tools?
So, it was shared how Clio was started with the solo practitioner in mind, right? They've now been able to grow and scale all the way up now with the enterprise solutions that you were talking about today. But most law firms are solo practitioners, small law to mid law. And a lot of times, I kind of take it for advantage within our own law firms. Most of our attorneys work on a 1-to-1 basis with a paralegal, or a 2-to-1 in some cases, depending on the paralegals. And we're really looking at what our legal support staff looks like moving forward. We're looking at what our caseloads look like. Something that myself and our CEO, David Crum, talk about all the time is like, okay, he just had a really interesting blog post a month or two ago, and is the death of the billable hour. And it's because, so many attorneys work on that billable hour as well as the legal support staff. And with these efficiencies, you are going to be, potentially billing less. So does that mean you have to carry a higher caseload? Do you switch to potentially a flat fee agreement? There's a lot of things that you can be doing, but we see a lot of that, kind of basic work that's been done a certain way for as long as it has been, just ripe for disruption and just streamlining that. So we've got a couple examples that I want to share on the legal side. And so this is where the information's a little dated, but that's okay. That's where it's like, you just have to have a vision. So, the automation for docket packets and court forms, anytime that you have a new client and they get moved to the onboarding, new client hire stage, whatever you may call that, you can then generate an engagement letter, get information back from them that can be auto-filled into their specific matter. and it's all kept in, I always call our CRM the source of truth. That's where all your information should be stored. And that's why data integrity is highly important, because, we're also talking about it, like the AI is only going to be as good as the data that it's given. But then from that, that's where being able to draft templates and court forms and get e-signatures is all going to be able to be automated. So I don't know what I don't know, admittedly.
It's this, like, while the interface may be changing, the general principles all still exist. You have a series of actions that you need to take on your behalf, and you don't necessarily need to be in the loop to send that engagement letter after you've said, I've converted them. Like, it's like, I'm going to work with this person. And just really be thinking about all those times where your next trigger is to do something, and just begin to think, hey, is this a thing I should be spending time on, or is this a great place for technology to slide in and take that burden away from me?
That just gave me a thought, Jonathan, that I hadn't really prepared for, but I feel like now law firms should be really focused on creating SOPs and really documenting what these processes are, because without that, they're not going to be able to understand where they can then insert and implement this technology.
But there's a portion of that I would agree with, but there's also the other sense of so in the coding space, like if you're working with AI, actually getting too descriptive yields a worse product, because you can strain it down to a very narrow path that it can, and you're basically telling it line by line what you want it to deliver. And being more expansive, like with what you want to do, actually presents itself with more opportunity and higher quality on the other end. I would honestly start here by describing your process to AI and just going, where do you think I can become more effective or efficient?
That's great.
And it can probably just point at 2 or 3 things, and then you can start exploring what tools, what software, what firms, and just unpack it from there.
That's great. So the other one is matter briefing. I mean, one of the most, regular complaints that attorneys get is a lack of communication, right? That is an age-old tale that unless we see massive adoption of AI is going to continue to be the case unless you are truly providing white glove service and you make it a priority within your business to have regular and ongoing communications. But then you have to be thinking, am I over communicating? Especially if you're billing for your time as you should be, could that potentially create friction or rife, between the client relationship, saying you billed me a 0.1 for this one email, like what's going on here? So here's a great example of where, you can take all the information that's happening behind the scenes, the updates that's happening to the matter, that can get consolidated into an email that's sent out in plain language, which is so important. And the summaries, the process, that I think is where AI for attorneys has some of the greatest potential impact, because something that is really manual, really personable, and really time consuming is now being empowering through AI, as opposed to saying, I hate sending client updates. Now it's like, oh, I don't have to worry about that. Now I look forward to speaking to my clients. So this last example is one that we use in our law firms, and it builds off a point that I brought up with the local search. So Google uses, their algorithm to figure out how do we present, who do we present. EEAT is kind of the guide work of who ranks where based off of your ability to show authority, trustworthiness, effectiveness. And so getting reviews is really important. Everyone, I think, can agree with that. You want that 5-star review. You can do that through an automation. But what you can also do is there is a great opportunity now within the closing sequence to add on to that. So, for example, for us, we have our intake team be able to say, okay, here's the amount that is remaining in trust or outstanding. So we know, and we can communicate to the prospect, you're either getting money back or you owe us money. once again, that goes back to our AR and making sure that we're capitalizing on that. We're also able to send them information 30, 60, 90 days, even a year out, because something that we've come to learn is, a lot of people, once they close their case, they don't really want to talk to you. It's like they're working with an attorney probably for a situation that isn't the best circumstances for them as an individual in many cases. And so after they just, wrote a check or just wrapped up, a period or traumatic event in their life, they don't really want to be hearing from you. So having a check-in, let's say 1 year after, and saying, hey, it's been a year. Have there been any changes in your life? Like I said, with family law, have there been any, is an ex-spouse looking to relocate? Is there a change to employment that changes the spousal support or child support? There's a lot of things that can be asked. So this is, once again, another way that within your legal services, you're providing continued additional support for others, while also upselling your own ability to gather, more revenue, because you have a zero cost of acquisition from a returning client. So these are some really great tools that can be done. And with that, unless there's anything you want to add to this final legal services side of things.
Listen, I would just double and triple down on this one. I work with some law firms for my personal stuff. And there was one time where I was closing a real estate transaction and my wife mentioned a will, and they were like, we do wills too. And I was like, great, let's talk later, because I'm not going to do that in the middle of this event.
Mm-hmm.
Never followed up. And then about a year later, all it would have taken was an email 3 weeks later, like, hey, what about that will? And then we would have been right back in.
Yep.
Probably working on the next book of business with them, and then so on and so forth. And there's just so much about this that you could follow up and continue to build on it. It feels like a missed opportunity for a lot of law firms that I work with.
Yeah, especially if you're a multi-practice firm. So there's so many that have, crossover, especially like criminal, family, and estate. The three of them have so much, crossover between the three of them. That's where it makes it really effective. And then you kind of become that go-to source. And so I couldn't agree more. I was the same way. Had my daughter 3 years ago. My dad was harping on me saying, Brent, you have to, get an estate and will set up. And emailed out a few law firms. I think I sent 3 inquiries and only 1 got back to me. So yeah, communication is important, and you'd be surprised at how few people do it. So that creates a lot of blue ocean for you to be the one that does it right.
My story on that was I emailed 10 law firms. None of them got back to me. And then I texted Jack and told him to intro me to a law firm.
Yeah.
That was how I found my attorney.
Send those 10 to your sales team. Be like, I think you really benefit from Leo. Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, we've got about 10 minutes left that we did want to open it up to some Q&A. All right, gentlemen right here.
What tools or software programs y'all use to actually create these automations? That's why I mentioned Zapier, but are there any other ones you're using?
Yeah, so Zapier's been around for a long time. It's super intuitive. It's also probably has the largest open API to the number of tools that can be integrated into it. I don't think I've found a tool that doesn't integrate into Zapier yet.
Be expansive.
Yeah, and so that's generally been the one that is my preferred use. There's also, a lot more that are more sophisticated, I would say. So if you're a beginner, Zapier would be the starting point.
I would agree. I think it depends on what you're wanting to tap into. If you haven't looked at Gumloop, I would look at them. They tie into Google Documents and Slack and a whole bunch of other stuff. So if your tech stack's relatively modern, they might tie in there, and they have a great interface for handling it. And it's not just AI. It's also do things in these other pieces of software. And there's a wide variety of solutions out there that are pretty cool. Yep, chewing gum.
Yeah. And I think the one thing I would add to this is we kind of took this as a point of view of bringing multiple technologies together right? You should also be looking at, what can you just do from an automation perspective within the singular platforms, whether that's a Clio, Lomatic, Smokeball, whatever they all have automations. And so starting there, I think what the next step is figuring out how do you get these different systems to then be talking to each other. And that's where it gets really powerful. So great question. Yeah. Sorry, we got Mike.
One of our struggles has been VoIP. We've had a couple of different systems, and I have yet to be able to integrate into Clio. Any suggestions there?
Voice over IP as a integration trouble. I personally cannot speak to that. Do you have?
There's a couple of integrators that work in it now, but I understand the struggle. Communications is a big focus for us over the next 6 to 12 months, because we see this intersection of all this AI data and how do you get it in, whether it's email, whether it's phone calls, whether it's video, and you're going to see stuff out of us over this period of time as well. But there are a bunch of integrators in our app ecosystem. I'm not quite sure the problems that you had, because I maybe pointed you back at the problems. Okay, got it. Yeah, we definitely have some integrated ones. So dial pads in there that integrates. There's a few others. You might pop down to either the product or the customer success lab, and they can point you at a few of them. And then there'll be vendors around as well that directly integrate with us. Yeah. You can also email me, and I can try to make a better intro than that.
All right, got the microphone en route.
I've been a Clio customer for a number of years. I think going on 8. I'm a family lawyer. I'm a solo. I have support staff, and I'm embarrassed, but I have definitely not used Clio in any type of robust way, and I'm seeing that more and more. But one of the things I've become very convicted of is the need to create the client portal and build that out. I recently contracted with a vendor to have an app, and they do integrate with Clio, but I had a very bad customer service experience with them. Very sexist emails when I expressed some frustration, telling me to calm down and watch my tone and things like that. And I sent a very professional email. And so I'm just going to eat the cost of that, basically not stay with them. And I'm wondering, is it worth it for me, given the client portal that you have that I know is quite robust and good from talking to other attorneys, is it worth it for me to try and either use a vendor or build out an app for my firm, or just use the Clio portal? I guess what I'm asking you is, tell me about Clio portal and client portal, and is that going to function much like an app?
Yeah, I think, are you talking app on a phone, or are you?
Oh, I mean, it doesn't really matter. I think the client experience is that they want, I do think the idea of this vendor is a very good one.
Yeah.
And they're becoming increasingly more prominent, but they have, so the client can log in and see what's going on, which if you're a family lawyer, that's a little nerve wracking too, because you don't want them to know you haven't filed that motion yet sometimes.
Yeah, for sure.
But overall, it's a good idea. So I guess whether it's an app or whether something that they can have that.
I mean, there's a couple of things. I don't know your full suite of what you're looking for, but what we do have in Clio for clients is quite effective at this point. We rebuilt that 4-ish years ago, and have continued to advance that in a bunch of ways. And this communications piece will fall into that in some way, shape, or form. What I would love to do is introduce you to Tom Zion, one of our product managers in the area, who runs Clio Grow. And he can very clearly break down what you're looking for and all sorts of stuff.
I've been subscribing to Clio Grow the whole time and have never once used it.
Okay, well then you definitely need to talk to Tom.
Yeah.
And he's
Embarrassing, I know.
I could intro you.
And I work 14-hour days, and
Yeah. There's some good solutions out there. We have some good app partners too that do this really well and are not behaving that way.
Great. With about 5 minutes left, would love to grab a couple final questions.
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for sharing your insights. I've been experimenting with some custom tools just as a hobby, and one thing that came across is MCP. Basically, what I'm trying to create is an experience talking to an AI that knows about my practice. Hey, if I want to know something about John's case, tell me what are all the deadlines, and then give it a command to draft discovery and all that stuff. But it seems like I couldn't find MCP connector with Clio and all that. Is it something down the line for your roadmap, or is there any security concerns that we should be thinking about when experimenting with tools like MCP?
Yeah, it's a great question. Basically, like, hey, how relevant are MCPs? Are you building one inside of Clio, or are you going to make it so AI can talk to it? The answer is we're still thinking about it. Like, I don't have a specific timeline. We haven't said yes or no at this point in time, but it is a conversation that we're having. I have great concerns about MCP servers, and I run the security function at Clio as well as compliance, mostly because they have not been built on any of the learnings we've made over the last 25 years on the internet, like around security and safety of data and accessibility. And every single day, our security team like comes across another thing that's out there because of these sorts of information. If you want to geek out about that, a guy named Gavin is downstairs, and he's our head of application security, and he spends a bunch of time in this area. That being said, there are safe ways to use them, and we do use them internally, but you have to be like relatively thoughtful about the deployment of that. But what's interesting is what you're describing is what we're trying to do in Manage AI and Clio work, is the ability to unpack all this information of what's going on in your firm without having to go out to another AI provider or bring in another tool into your system, because we know how important it is to be able to mine your data and get answers and eventually just take action for you in a wide variety of ways.
Again, first, thanks. And then I'll say for me, one of the things that's the bane of my existence is trying to do inventories. It's like pulling teeth to get information from clients, right? How many different, what's a bank statement? Not a screenshot. And it looked like maybe with the Manage AI, there's a way to create something that the client, we can kind of set up the prompt so I could tell the client, hey, go to this, and it'll say, tell me about all the real estate the decedent owned, gather information, move on to cars, something like that.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And that we've had that capability in questionnaires. You just had to go in and manually set it up every time you wanted to do it. But ideally, we can just be like, hey, this matter usually requires this set of information. You don't have these 12 pieces of information. Do you want us to send an email to the client to get it? And that's the dream. And then eventually it's going to send it because it knows you've been waiting for 2 weeks, and it's going to follow up and encourage them to fill it out.
All right. I think this is going to be our last question.
Yep.
It's not really a question, sorry. I just wanted to circle back about the the VoIP. I use Zoom. It integrates well, and I can just click on my client's phone number and it calls right from Zoom phone. So I don't know what your pain point is, but it seems to be integrating quite well.
Well, Brent, thank you so much.
No, I appreciate it, Jonathan. That was really fun being able to talk shop with you and share some ideas. So if anyone does want to catch up, look for me. I've got red hair. You can't miss me. This is also kind of like the big dog. So, Jonathan's going to be around.
Usually running from one thing to the next.
Yeah.
If I'm in a hurry, it's not anything.
Nothing personal.
Yeah, nothing personal.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate it, everyone. Thank you for joining us today, and have a great ClioCon.
Yeah. Thank you.